When Aunt Gertrude heard the words of her nephew, her hands stopped trembling, not from fear, from something no one there expected, because none of them knew what the lawyer was about to reveal. But to understand what happened that night, you need to know what occurred 3 days before, on Christmas Eve, when there was still hope. Aunt Gertrude was 68 years old. Her skin was as dark as the coffee she made every morning. Her white hair was pulled back into a bun her mother had taught her to make when she was just 7 years old. A large frame that carried 6 decades of work, of caring for others, of cooking for families that weren't her own. She lived alone in a small house in Little Italy, 2 bedrooms, a leaky bathroom, a kitchen where the smell of beans and rice never quite disappeared. It was all she had, and it was enough, or so she told herself. That Christmas Eve morning, Gertrude woke before dawn. As always, her body didn't know any other way to function after 40 years working as a cook in other people's homes. But today was different. Today was Christmas, and for the first time in 3 years, she had been invited. The message from Richard, her eldest nephew, had arrived 2 weeks earlier. A short message, almost cold, but it was an invitation. That was what mattered. "Auntie, come to Christmas dinner. It'll be at my place at 8. Gertrude read that message 27 times. She knew the exact number because every time she read it, she felt something warm in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. She had raised Richard, and Michael, and Patricia, all 4 of her sister Delia's children. Delia had died in an accident when the youngest was just 6 years old. Gertrude never had children of her own, never married. She dedicated her life to caring for other people's children, and when her sister died, she cared for hers as if they were her own. She took them to school, made them meals, told them bedtime stories, dried their tears, taught them how to tie their shoes, to say please and thank you, to respect their elders. And when they grew up, one by one, they forgot about her. If you've ever felt like the world turned its back on you after everything you gave, this video is for you. Stay until the end. Because what happened to Aunt Gertrude will change the way you see the invisible people. That morning, Gertrude opened her closet and looked at the only decent clothes she owned. A floral dress, blue with white flowers. She had bought it 15 years ago for Patricia's daughter's christening. It was a little worn at the elbows. The color wasn't as vibrant anymore. But it was the best she had. She took it off the hanger carefully, smelled it. It still held a little of the cheap perfume she used on special occasions. She ironed it 3 times, making sure there wasn't a single wrinkle left. Then she went to the bathroom, looked at herself in the cracked mirror hanging over the sink. She saw the wrinkles, the age spots on her skin, the hair that had turned completely white in the last 5 years, the body that wasn't what it used to be. But she also saw something else. She saw the woman who had survived, the woman who had raised 4 children without asking for anything in return, the woman who was still here, still breathing, still hoping. "Auntie," she said to herself, using the nickname her nephews and nieces had given her when they were little. "Today, you're going to be with your family." She spent all day getting ready. She bathed with the special soap she saved for important occasions, put cream on her hands, chapped from years of washing dishes, put on a little makeup, just a touch of pink lipstick she had bought on sale. And as the sun began to set, she put on the floral dress, the only closed-toe shoes she owned. and left her house with a plate of sweets she had made the night before. Coconut cream pie, her grandmother's recipe, Richard's favorite dessert when he was a boy. The taxi dropped her off in front of Richard's mansion at 7:45, 15 minutes early, because being late would be disrespectful. Gertrude stood in front of the gate for a long moment, looking at the house. It was huge, 3 stories, perfectly manicured gardens, Christmas lights decorating every window, luxury cars parked in the driveway, a world completely different from hers. Richard was a businessman. He owned 4 restaurants in the city. He made more money in a month than she had made in her entire life. And yet, 20 years ago, when Richard was a skinny, scared teenager who had just lost his mother, it was Gertrude who hugged him. It was Gertrude who told him everything would be all right. It was Gertrude who made him soup when he was sick and helped him with his homework when he didn't understand math. She took a deep breath, held the plate of coconut cream pie tight against her chest, and walked towards the door. The first sign that something was wrong came before she even rang the bell. She heard laughter inside, music, cheerful voices, a party in full swing. And when the door opened, it wasn't Richard who greeted her. It was Fernanda, Richard's wife, a blonde woman of 42 who always looked at Gertrude like she was something she had stepped in on the street. "Oh," said Fernanda, her smile disappearing for a second before returning. Plastic, as always. "You're here." She didn't say welcome, didn't say good to see you, didn't say come in, just you're here. As if Gertrude's arrival was a problem she had to deal with. "I brought coconut cream pie," said Gertrude, extending the plate. "It's my grandmother's recipe, Richard's favorite when he was a boy." Fernanda looked at the plate as if it contained poison. "Oh," she said. "How kind. Rosie, come here." A woman appeared behind Fernanda, also black, also older though younger than Gertrude, maid's uniform, white apron over a blue dress. "Take this to the kitchen," ordered Fernanda, passing the plate without even looking at it. "And make sure it's away from the real desserts." Rosie took the plate. Her eyes met Gertrude's for a second. There was something there. Something that looked like apology. Something that looked like recognition. But she didn't say anything, just nodded and left. "Well," said Fernanda, crossing her arms, "you can come in, but try not to get in the way. We have important guests." Gertrude entered the mansion. It was even more impressive inside. Crystal chandeliers, furniture that probably cost more than her entire house. A 10-foot Christmas tree, decorated with golden ornaments and lights that twinkled in perfect sync. And people. Lots of people. Men in suits, women in sparkly dresses and jewelry that reflected the light. Champagne glasses, polite laughter. Conversations about vacations in Europe and investments in the stock market. No one even glanced at Aunt Gertrude. It was as if she were invisible. She walked among the guests, searching for her nephews and nieces. She found Mark first, the second of the siblings, 44 years old, a lawyer, always the most serious of the 4. "Mark," Aunt Gertrude said, touching his arm gently. He turned. For a fleeting second, something crossed his face. Something that could have been shame, or discomfort, or both. "Auntie," he said, his voice low. "You came." "I was invited," Aunt Gertrude replied, trying to smile. "Yeah, right." Mark looked around, as if searching for an escape route. Listen, I'm in the middle of an important conversation. I'll catch up with you later." And he walked away. Without a hug, without asking how she was doing, without anything. Aunt Gertrude stood there, in the middle of this crowded party, feeling the weight of her floral dress, feeling how every gaze passed right through her, as if she didn't exist. But she didn't leave, because she still had hope. She found Patty near the Christmas tree, the youngest of the 4 siblings, 42 years old. She had always been the most affectionate towards Aunt Gertrude, the one who sometimes called to ask how she was doing, the one who sometimes remembered her birthday. "Auntie Gertie," Patty said, and her smile seemed genuine. "You came." "I came," Aunt Gertrude replied, and for the first time that night she felt a flicker of warmth. "I'm glad," Patty said, but she quickly glanced over her shoulder, as if she were watching something or someone. "Listen, Auntie, things are a little complicated tonight. Rick and Mindy have very important guests. Business partners. Maybe it would be better if you stayed a little more in the background. In the background, like old furniture that you don't want the guests to see." "All right," Aunt Gertrude said, even though it wasn't all right. Nothing was all right. Patty gave her a quick, almost mechanical hug and went off to attend to other guests. If this story is making you feel something, whether it's anger, sadness, or recognition, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. Use the super thanks if you want to support us continuing to tell stories of invisible people. Every penny helps to give them a voice. Aunt Gertrude stayed in a corner of the living room for the next hour. No one spoke to her. No one offered her a drink. No one asked if she wanted to sit down. When a waiter passed by with a tray of hors d'oeuvres, he didn't even look at her. She watched everything from her corner. She watched Rick laughing with his partners, telling stories of his business trips. She watched Mindy moving among the guests like a queen, receiving compliments on the decorations. She watched Mark discussing politics with men in expensive suits. She watched Patty avoiding her gaze, and she wondered, not for the first time, where the family she had raised had gone. Where was the little boy who used to say, "Auntie Gertie, tell me a story before I go to sleep"? Where was the little girl who used to ask her to teach her how to make coconut cream pie? Where were the teenagers who ran to hug her when she arrived for a visit? They were gone. They were all gone. And in their place were adults who looked at her like an uncomfortable reminder of times they preferred to forget. At 10 o'clock, dinner was served, a long, elegant table, with 30 places perfectly set, white tablecloths, china plates, crystal glasses, a feast fit for kings. Aunt Gertrude looked for her place. There was none. "Excuse me," she said to one of the waiters. "Where do I sit?" The waiter looked her up and down, her floral dress, her worn-out shoes, her body that clearly didn't belong in that world. "I'm sorry, ma'am," he said, "but the table is full. There are only places for the guests." "But I am a guest," Aunt Gertrude said. The waiter frowned, confused. "Wait here." He went to find someone. Minutes later, he returned with Mindy. "What's going on?" Mindy asked, her voice tight. "This lady says she's a guest," the waiter said. Mindy sighed, as if Aunt Gertrude were a problem she had to solve. "Look," she said, addressing Aunt Gertrude with a tone she would use with a slow child. "The table is full. There are 30 places for 30 guests. We can't just add more chairs." "But Rick invited me," Aunt Gertrude said. "Yeah, right. For you to come say hello, not for you to stay for dinner." The words hit Aunt Gertrude like a slap. For her to come say hello, like she was a pet they brought out to show off and then put away. Mindy leaned in a little closer, speaking softly so the other guests wouldn't hear. "Listen," she said, "we don't have room for you here. You understand, right? This is an important dinner. There are business people, people who matter, and you, well, you don't exactly fit in. Aunt Gertrude felt the air escape from her lungs. 40 years. She had spent 40 years taking care of this family. She had sacrificed her youth, her dreams, her chance to have her own family, and now they were telling her that she didn't fit in, that she didn't matter. Mindy reached into her purse and took out a bill. "Here," she said, extending it towards Aunt Gertrude. "For the cab. There's a stop 2 blocks away. Merry Christmas." And she walked away, without waiting for a response, without looking back. Aunt Gertrude stood there, in the middle of that crowded mansion, holding a $20 bill in her hand. 68 years of life, 40 years of service to this family, and all she received was $20 for a cab. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came when she looked for her nephews and nieces. Rick was at the head of the table, serving wine to his guests. She looked at him, hoping he would notice what was happening, that he would say something, that he would defend her. He saw her. Their eyes met for a second, and then he looked away, as if he didn't know her. Mark was 3 chairs away. He also saw her. He also looked away, and Patty, who had always been the most affectionate. Patty looked at her with something that looked like sadness, but she said nothing. She didn't get up. She didn't defend her. None of them did. Aunt Gertrude walked towards the front door. Each step felt like she was walking on broken glass. Every breath was an effort. The floral dress she had ironed 3 times that morning now felt like a mockery. When she reached the door, a hand stopped her. "Mrs. Gertrude." It was Rosie, the housekeeper, the one who had taken the coconut cream pie. "Here," Rosie said, slipping something into Aunt Gertrude's hand. "It's the pie. I saved it before they threw it away." "Threw it away?" Aunt Gertrude repeated. Rosie lowered her gaze. "Mrs. Mindy said to throw it in the trash, but I didn't. It's too good to waste." Aunt Gertrude looked at the small container in her hands, her pie, her grandmother's recipe, the dessert she'd made with love for her family. They were going to throw it in the trash. "Aunt Gertrude," Rosie said softly, "I'm so sorry. You don't deserve this. No one deserves this." Gertrude looked at her. 2 black women. 2 invisible women. In a world that preferred not to see them. "Thank you," Gertrude said, and she opened the door and stepped out into the night. There wasn't a taxi waiting. No one had called one. That $50 bill was a lie. Or maybe it was the truth. It was all she was worth to them. She walked to the nearest bus stop, alone, on Christmas, with a coconut cream pie in her hands and a broken heart in her chest. And that was the night Aunt Gertrude stopped waiting. What no one knew. Not Fernanda, not Ricardo, not any of those who had humiliated her that night, was that in 3 days, everything was going to change, because sometimes karma is slow, but it never forgets. And this time, karma was coming in a lawyer's suit and a $60 million will. Gertrude spent Christmas alone in her small place in Little Italy, alone with her old cat named Prince, alone with a dinner she had prepared for one, because she knew, deep down she always knew, that no one else would come. She ate the coconut cream pie sitting in her plastic chair, watching television, which showed happy families celebrating together. Each image was like salt in an open wound. But she didn't cry. She had learned a long time ago that tears didn't change anything. Tears didn't make people love you. Tears didn't make them remember everything you had done for them. So she simply sat there, eating pie, watching television, pretending she was okay. At 1 in the morning, when the television was only showing infomercials about miracle cookware, Gertrude got up from her chair and went to her bedroom. She opened the closet, took out an old shoebox that she kept on the highest shelf. The box was covered in dust. She hadn't opened it in years. Inside were photos. Photos from another time. Another life. The first photo she took out was of 2 children. A girl of 8 with braids and a floral dress. A boy of 6 with a smile that took up his whole face. Gertrude and Otto, her brother. Her brother, who had gone to the United States 40 years ago, looking for a better life. Her brother, who had promised to come back rich and take her with him. Her brother, who stopped writing after 5 years. Her brother, who, according to rumors from acquaintances, had died poor and alone in some hospital in Miami. Otto. Gertrude ran her fingers over the photo, over the face of her little brother, the boy who followed her everywhere, the boy who used to say, "Gertie, you're the best person in the world." "Where are you now, Otto?" she whispered. "Why did you leave me alone?" She didn't expect an answer. Photos don't talk. The dead don't answer. Or so she thought. What would you do if someone treated you the way they treated Aunt Gertrude? Would you stay silent? Would you scream? Would you leave and never come back? Or would you wait? Because sometimes the best revenge isn't the one you seek. It's the one that finds you. On December 26th, Gertrude woke up to the sound of knocking on her door. It wasn't a normal knock. It was insistent, urgent, as if someone needed to get in desperately. Gertrude got out of bed with difficulty. Her bones protested a little more every morning. She walked to the door, opening it just a crack. Aunt Gertrude Oliveira de Souza. It was a question, but it sounded like a statement. In the doorway was a man, tall, elegant, a dark grey suit that probably cost more than all the furniture in her house, grey hair, combed back, brown eyes that conveyed an almost solemn seriousness. "Who's asking?" Gertrude said, without opening the door all the way. "My name is Samuel Norwood," the man said. "I'm a lawyer. I have information about your brother, Otto Oliveira de Souza." Gertrude felt the world stop. Otto. Her brother. The brother she thought was dead. "What kind of information?" she managed to say. "Important information," the lawyer said. "May I come in? What I have to tell you shouldn't be heard at the door." Gertrude hesitated for a moment. Her whole life, she had been taught to distrust strangers, especially strangers in expensive suits who promised things that were too good to be true. But something in this man's eyes told her that this was real, that this was important, that this was going to change everything. She opened the door. The lawyer entered her small home. He looked around without judging, without that expression of disgust that Fernanda had had, just observing, cataloguing. "May I sit down?" he asked. Gertrude pointed to the plastic chair, the only decent chair she had. The lawyer sat down. He opened a leather briefcase that he was carrying. He took out a thick folder full of documents. "Aunt Gertrude," he said, "your brother Otto passed away 3 months ago. In Miami, Florida." Gertrude nodded. She already knew that, or at least she suspected it. "What you probably don't know," the lawyer continued, is that your brother didn't die poor. In fact, he died as one of the wealthiest men in Florida." Gertrude laughed. A short, dry, humorless laugh. "You're joking," she said. "I never joke about money, Aunt Gertrude. And even less so about the amount of money we're talking about here." The lawyer took a document out of the folder. He held it out to her. "Your brother built a real estate empire in Miami. He bought cheap properties, renovated them, sold them for 10 times their value. He did this for 35 years, and when he died, his net worth was approximately $80 million. Gertrude looked at the document. The numbers swam before her eyes. They couldn't be real. None of this could be real. "And here," the lawyer said, taking out another document, "is the will." Gertrude took the paper with trembling hands. The words danced, but some stuck in her brain. "I, Otto Oliveira de Souza, being of sound mind and body, leave 90% of my estate to my sister, Gertrude Oliveira de Souza, the woman who raised me when our parents couldn't, the woman who gave me her last piece of bread so that I could eat, the woman who told me to seek a better life, even if it meant leaving her behind. She is the only family I ever had, and she deserves everything I have." Gertrude stopped reading. Her hands were trembling so much that the paper crackled. "This can't be real," she whispered. "It's very real," the lawyer said. "I've been trying to locate you for 3 months. Your brother never updated his address in the records. He only had this old address. I had to hire private investigators to find you." "But," Gertrude said, her voice barely a whisper, "why me? Why not? No way. Someone else will have to do it." The lawyer smiled for the first time, a sad but genuine smile. "Because your brother never forgot you, Aunt Gertrude. I have letters he wrote, but never sent. Hundreds of letters, talking about you, about how he missed you, how he wanted to come back, but he was ashamed because in the beginning he had nothing. And later, when he had everything, he was afraid they'd think he was only coming back to show off." "Letters," Aunt Gertrude repeated, her voice barely a whisper. The lawyer nodded. He took a thick packet from the folder. Yellowed envelopes tied with a red ribbon. "These are for you," he said. He kept them all, every single one he wrote, but never had the courage to send. Aunt Gertrude took the packet as if it were the most precious treasure in the world, because it was. It was proof that her brother had loved her, that he hadn't forgotten her, that somewhere in the world someone had thought of her all these years. The tears came then. 40 years of tears held back. 40 years of feeling abandoned, forgotten, invisible. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation. "There's one last detail," the lawyer said, waiting for Aunt Gertrude to calm down a little. "The will specifies that the remaining 10% goes to charity, organizations that help abandoned seniors, and there's a special clause." "What clause?" Aunt Gertrude asked, wiping her eyes. "No biological relative of yours except yourself will receive a cent from this inheritance. Your brother was very specific about that. He said that the only relatives you have are the children of your sister, Rosie, and that those children deserve nothing because they abandoned you when you needed them most." Aunt Gertrude froze. "How did he know that?" "Your brother was watching over you, Aunt Gertrude. Not personally, but he had people. He knew when they treated you badly. He knew when they ignored you. He knew everything. And that's why he left very clear instructions. This money is yours, only yours, and no one else's." Aunt Gertrude looked at the letters in her hands. She looked at the documents on the table. She looked at the lawyer in his expensive suit and his serious expression. And suddenly, something changed inside her. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was something deeper. It was the realization that she had spent her whole life being invisible, being ignored, being treated as if she were worthless. And now, suddenly, she was worth $60 million. "What do I do now?" she asked, her voice firmer than it had been in years. "Whatever you want," the lawyer said. "It's your money, your life, your decisions." Aunt Gertrude thought about Richie's mansion, about the Christmas dinner she had been thrown out of, about the faces of her nephews looking away while they humiliated her. And she thought about New Year's Eve. The family always celebrated New Year's Eve at the same mansion. It was a tradition to which she had never been invited, until now. "Mr. Noronha," Aunt Gertrude said, "I have a favor to ask of you." The lawyer raised an eyebrow. "Tell me. I want to go to a party, but I need to look different. I need no one to recognize me until the time is right." The lawyer smiled, this time a complete smile. "Aunt Gertrude," he said, "it will be a pleasure to help you. If you think money can't buy happiness, you're right. But it can buy justice. And sometimes that's exactly what's needed." The next 4 days were the most surreal of Aunt Gertrude's life. The lawyer took her to a bank, not just any bank, a private bank where they treated her like royalty. They opened accounts for her. They explained investments to her. They gave her credit cards with no limit. Then he took her to a store, a clothing store in a neighborhood where she would never have dared to enter, where the mannequins wore dresses that cost more than a year of her pension. But now she could afford those dresses. She could afford 100 of those dresses if she wanted to. The saleswoman looked at her with suspicion at first. Another black, plus-sized woman entering a luxury store, probably thinking about calling security, until the lawyer showed the credit card. The attitude changed instantly. Suddenly, Aunt Gertrude was, "Dear ma'am. Which dress would you like to try on, ma'am? Shall we bring you champagne while you wait, ma'am?" It was disgusting, and at the same time, it was revealing. The world treated people differently depending on how much money they had. And now, Aunt Gertrude had more money than those saleswomen would ever see in their lives. She chose a dress, dark blue, elegant but not ostentatious. A dress that said, "I have money," without screaming, "Look how much money I have." Then she went to the salon. She got her hair done. She got her nails done. She had her makeup done professionally for the first time in her life. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't recognize the woman looking back at her. She was still Aunt Gertrude. She was still black. She was still plus-sized. She was still 68 years old. But there was something different in her eyes, something that hadn't been there before. It was power, not just the power of money, although that helped too. It was the power of knowing that she was worth something, that she had always been worth something, and that finally, the world was going to see it. December 31st came faster than expected. Aunt Gertrude put on her new dress, her new shoes, her new jewelry. Not much jewelry, just a pearl necklace that had belonged to Otto's mother, her mother, a necklace the lawyer had brought from Miami especially for her. The car arrived at 9 o'clock at night. Not a taxi, a black Mercedes with a uniformed chauffeur. Another detail, courtesy of the lawyer. When the car stopped in front of Richie's mansion, Aunt Gertrude felt a knot in her stomach. It was the same place where they had humiliated her a week ago. The same place where they had treated her like trash. The same place where her nephews had looked at her and decided she wasn't worth defending. But this time, it was different. This time, she had the power. "Ready?" asked the lawyer, who was sitting next to her in the car. "Ready," said Aunt Gertrude, and she opened the door. The mansion was even more illuminated than at Christmas. Lights everywhere, a giant tree in the garden, uniformed waiters circulating with trays of champagne, classical music playing from somewhere invisible, and people. Hundreds of people, more than at Christmas dinner. Much more. Aunt Gertrude got out of the Mercedes with the help of the chauffeur. Her new high-heeled shoes touched the stone floor. Her dark blue dress shimmered under the lights. No one recognized her. The guests watched her pass with curiosity. Who was this elegant woman? Where did she come from? Why was she arriving in a Mercedes with a chauffeur? But no one associated her with the old woman in the flowered dress they had thrown out last week. No one saw Aunt Gertrude, the invisible aunt. They craved someone else's attention, someone important, someone worth looking at. It's just amazing what an expensive dress and a luxury car can do to change people's perceptions. Aunt Gertrude walked toward the entrance. Her lawyer followed 2 steps behind. Discreet, professional, ready to act when the time was right. At the door, a security guard stopped her. "Your name, ma'am?" Aunt Gertrude smiled. "Gertrude Oliveira de Souza," she said. "I'm here to see my family." The guard checked his list. He frowned. "I don't see your name here, ma'am." "I'm not surprised," Aunt Gertrude said. "They never put me on the lists. But trust me, my family will want to see me." Before the guard could respond, a familiar voice called out from inside. "What's going on here?" It was Rosie, dressed in a bright red gown, diamonds in her ears, a glass of champagne in her hand. The queen of her castle. She approached the door with an irritated expression, looked Aunt Gertrude up and down, and didn't recognize her. "Who are you?" Rosie asked, her tone the same she'd use with an annoying salesperson. Aunt Gertrude felt a surge of satisfaction wash over her. "You don't recognize me, Rosie?" Rosie's face changed. First confusion, then surprise, and finally, horror. "Auntie," she stammered, her voice trembling. "Auntie Gertrude." "In the flesh," Aunt Gertrude said. "I came to celebrate New Year's with my family. Is there a problem with that?" Rosie opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. No words came out. Behind her, other guests had started to notice the scene. Whispers, curious glances, the kind of attention Rosie detested. Rosie began, trying to regain her composure. "I didn't know you were coming. You're not on the list." "You didn't invite me," Aunt Gertrude said, "but I decided to come anyway. I hope you don't mind." It wasn't a question. It was a statement. And Rosie, for the first time in her life, didn't know how to respond. Aunt Gertrude walked into the mansion without waiting for permission. She moved through the guests as if she owned the place, because in a way, she could now buy this entire place 10 times over without batting an eye. She found Ricky first. Her eldest nephew was near the bar, laughing with a group of businessmen, glasses of whiskey, expensive cigars, the perfect picture of success. "Ricky," Aunt Gertrude said. He turned around, and his face went through the same phases as Rosie's. Confusion, recognition, panic. "Auntie," he said, his voice barely a whisper, "what are you doing here?" "I came to celebrate," Aunt Gertrude said. "It's New Year's. I should be with my family, don't you think?" The men surrounding Ricky watched them with curiosity. The atmosphere had become tense. "Can we talk in private?" Ricky said, taking Aunt Gertrude by the arm. "No," Aunt Gertrude said, pulling away. "I think what I have to say should be heard by everyone." Ricky paled. "Auntie, please." "Please what, Ricky? Please don't embarrass you in front of your rich friends. Please don't let me tell them how you kicked me out of your house on Christmas. Please don't tell them you gave me $5 for a taxi and told me I didn't fit in." The whispers had turned into absolute silence. Everyone watched. Everyone listened. "That's not," Ricky started. "That's not what?" Aunt Gertrude interrupted. "That's not humiliating. That's not cruel. That's not the worst experience of my life. Because I assure you, it was all those things." The crowd had grown. Mikey and Patty had appeared. Rosie was in the back, her face red with shame or rage. It was hard to tell. "I raised you," Aunt Gertrude continued, her voice firm. "I raised all of you. When your mother died, I was there. When you had no food, I cooked with what little I had. When you were sick, I spent sleepless nights taking care of you. And how did you repay me? By kicking me out of your house on Christmas like I was garbage." "Auntie," Patty said, taking a step forward, "we're sorry. We shouldn't have." "No," Aunt Gertrude interrupted. "You shouldn't have. But you did. And now you're going to listen to what I have to say." She turned to the lawyer, who had remained silent all this time. "Mr. Novak," she said, "please." The lawyer nodded, stepped forward, and pulled a document from his briefcase. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his professional voice echoing in the silence. "My name is Samuel Novak. I'm an international probate attorney, and I have the honor of representing Ms. Gertrude Oliveira de Souza, universal heir to the estate of Otto Oliveira de Souza." The silence became even deeper. "Who the heck is Otto Oliveira de Souza?" Ricky asked. "My brother," Aunt Gertrude said. "Your great-uncle, the one you all thought died poor in the States." Ricky frowned. "And what does that have to do with us?" The lawyer smiled. "Mr. Otto passed away 3 months ago," he said, "leaving an estate of approximately $80 million, of which 90%, that is, $72 million, was left entirely to his sister, Ms. Gertrude." The silence that followed was so absolute, you could hear the wind outside. $72 million. The words hung in the air like something unreal. Rosie was the first to break the silence. "That's ridiculous," she said, her voice sharp. "That can't be true." "I can assure you it's very true," the lawyer said. "I have all the documents here, certificates of inheritance, bank statements, deeds to properties in Miami, all perfectly legal and verifiable." The faces of the nephews and nieces had gone through several phases: shock, disbelief, and now something else. Something Aunt Gertrude recognized immediately: greed. "Auntie," Ricky said, his tone changing completely. "Auntie, I'm so sorry about Christmas. It was a misunderstanding. Rosie shouldn't have treated you like that." "I shouldn't have," Aunt Gertrude interrupted. "But you didn't say anything either. None of you said anything." We had important guests," Mikey tried to explain. "It wasn't the right time. It wasn't the right time to defend the woman who raised you," Aunt Gertrude said. "But it's the right time to apologize now that she has money." "It's not like that," Patty said. "Auntie, we love you. We've always loved you." "You love me," Aunt Gertrude repeated. "You loved me so much that you left me alone on Christmas. You love me so much that you didn't even call to see if I got home safe. You love me so much that I had to spend the most important night of the year eating alone in front of a television." Tears had started to fall down Patty's cheeks. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm really sorry." Aunt Gertrude looked at her. Of all her nephews and nieces, Patty was the only one who seemed genuinely regretful, the only one who seemed to understand what she had done. But that didn't change anything. Aunt Gertrude said, "My brother's will is very clear. No biological relative of mine except myself will receive anything from this inheritance. Ottavio knew how you all treated me. He had people keeping him informed, and he decided that none of you deserved a single penny." The faces shifted again. Greed turned into rage. "That's unfair," Ricardo said. "We're family." "Family," Aunt Gertrude repeated, savoring the irony of the word. "Family is what we were when I was raising you, when I cooked for you, when I nursed your wounds. But you stopped treating me like family a long time ago." "We can contest the will," said Marcello, the family lawyer. "There are legal avenues." Lawyer Nerona interrupted. "You can try, but I'll warn you, I'm one of the most recognized international probate specialists on the continent, and this will is airtight, notarized in 3 countries, with anti-challenge clauses. Your brother was a very intelligent man, Mrs. Gertrude. He made sure no one could take what he left you." Marcello snapped his mouth shut. Gertrude looked around, at the guests who were silently observing, at her nephews who were looking at her with a mix of rage and despair, at Fernanda, whose face was so red she looked like she was about to explode, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. "It's not revenge I seek," Gertrude said, her voice softer now. "I didn't come here to humiliate you the way you humiliated me. I came so you would know the truth, so you'd understand that invisible people have value too. That old aunts who get kicked out of parties also deserve respect." She paused. "And I came to say goodbye." "Goodbye?" Patricia asked. "I'm going to Miami," Gertrude said. "To see the place where my brother lived all these years. To see the properties that are now mine. To start a new life." "But Auntie," Ricardo said, taking a step forward, "you can't just leave like this with some... We're your family. We can fix things." "Not anymore," Gertrude said. "We're not family anymore. You stopped being family when you decided I didn't fit into your shiny world." She turned toward the door, but before leaving, she stopped. "There's one more thing," she said. She looked toward the back of the mansion, toward where the staff was standing, watching the scene with expressions that mixed surprise and something that looked like satisfaction. "Rosie," Gertrude called. The maid approached slowly. She was still wearing her uniform. She still had that expression of someone accustomed to being invisible. "Yes, ma'am," Rosie said. "You saved my coconut cream pie the other night," Gertrude said, "when everyone else was going to throw it in the trash." "Yes, ma'am," Rosie said, confused. Gertrude smiled. "That showed me that you're a good person, a person who sees others, a person worth knowing." She took a card from her purse. She extended it to Rosie. "This is my number," she said. "When you finish working here, call me. I have an offer for you." Rosie took the card with trembling hands. "What kind of offer?" she asked. "I'm going to open a foundation," Gertrude said, "to help abandoned seniors, people like me, people that no one sees. And I'm going to need someone to help me, someone who understands what it's like to be invisible." Tears began to fall down Rosie's cheeks. "But ma'am," she said, "I'm just a maid. I don't know anything about foundations. Neither do I, Gertrude said. But we can learn together. What do you say? Rosie looked at her. She looked at the employers who had treated her like a piece of furniture for 15 years. She looked at the card in her hand, and she smiled. I'd love to, she said. Gertrude nodded. She turned to her nephews one last time. Happy New Year, she said. I hope next year teaches you something about what really matters in life. Because the money you have won't do you any good when you're old and alone. And with the way you treat people, you're going to end up very, very alone. And with that, Aunt Gertrude Oliveira de Souza, heiress to $72 million, walked out of the mansion where she had been humiliated a week before. But this time, she didn't run out. She didn't walk out crying. She didn't walk out with a 50-peso bill in her hand. She walked out with her head held high, with a lawyer by her side, with a Mercedes waiting for her at the door, and with something that was worth more than all the millions in the world, her dignity intact. If this story made you feel something, whether anger at the injustice or satisfaction at the karma, then you understand what I'm talking about. Use the super thanks if you want to support us continuing to tell stories of invisible people. Every bit of support makes a difference. 6 months later, Gertrude was sitting on the balcony of her apartment in Miami. An apartment with an ocean view. With furniture she had chosen herself. With photos of her brother Otavio on every wall. The sun was setting over the ocean, painting the sky orange and pink. A spectacle Gertrude never tired of seeing. In her hand, she held one of Otavio's letters. She had read it hundreds of times, but each time she found something new, some detail that had escaped her, some word that reminded her of the child her brother had been. Dear Auntie, the letter read, today I turn 60 and I still think about you every day. I wonder if you're okay. If you're happy, if you finally found someone to take care of you the way you took care of everyone else. I want to see you again. I want to hug you. I want to tell you in person how much you mean to me. But I'm afraid. Afraid that you won't recognize me. Afraid that you've forgotten me. Afraid that time has destroyed what we had. So I'm still here. Building. Working. Waiting for the moment when I have the courage to return. Your brother who loves you, Otavio. The letter was dated 8 years ago. 8 years before Otavio died without finding the courage to return. Gertrude wiped away a tear. Not of sadness, of gratitude. Because although they never saw each other again, she knew now that her brother had loved her to the end. That he had never forgotten her. That he had spent his life building something to leave to her that was worth more than any amount of money. Mrs. Gertrude, the voice came from inside the apartment. It was Rosie. She was no longer wearing a maid's uniform. Now she was wearing casual clothes, elegant but comfortable. The kind of clothes a foundation director would wear, because that's who Rosie was now. Director of the Auntie Titi Foundation. The foundation had been Gertrude's idea, but Rosie had turned it into reality. In 6 months, they had opened 3 homes for abandoned seniors, in Sao Paulo, in Rio, and 1 in Miami, for elderly Latin Americans who had emigrated and ended up alone. Each home bore the name of someone important to Aunt Gertrude. The first was named Otavio House, after her brother. The second, Dalva House, after her sister. The third, Rosie House, because Aunt Gertrude insisted. What's wrong? Aunt Gertrude asked. You have a call, Rosie said. It's Patricia. Again. Aunt Gertrude sighed. Patricia had been calling every week since Aunt Gertrude left for Miami, sometimes to apologize, sometimes to ask how she was doing, sometimes just to cry. She was the only one of the 4 nephews and nieces who had tried to maintain contact. Richard hadn't called once. Marcelo had sent a formal letter through his lawyer, attempting to contest the will. The challenge had been rejected in 3 different jurisdictions. Fernanda had posted nasty things on social media, calling Aunt Gertrude a thankless old woman who had stolen money that didn't belong to her. But Patricia was different. Patricia seemed genuinely remorseful. "Pass me the call," Aunt Gertrude said. Rosie nodded and handed her the phone. "Auntie," Patricia's voice said, "thank you for answering." "I always answer," Aunt Gertrude said. "You know that." There was a long silence. "Auntie, I want to ask you something," Patricia finally said. "Tell me. I want to come see you in Miami. I want to talk to you in person, explain things, apologize properly." Aunt Gertrude looked at the ocean, the waves crashing against the shore, the sun disappearing on the horizon. She thought about Christmas night, about Patricia looking away while they humiliated her, about Patricia saying nothing when they ordered her to leave. But she also thought about the little girl Patricia had been, the little girl who ran to hug her when she came to visit, the little girl who would say, "Auntie Titi, I love you so much." That little girl was still there somewhere. "Come," Aunt Gertrude said, "but come alone, without Richard, without Marcelo, without Fernanda, just you." "Thank you," Patricia said, her voice breaking with tears. "Thank you, Auntie." "Don't thank me yet," Aunt Gertrude said, "because we're going to have a very long conversation, and you're going to listen to everything I have to say." "I will," Patricia said. "I promise." Aunt Gertrude hung up. Rosie was looking at her with a questioning expression. "You invited her?" she asked. "I invited her," Aunt Gertrude confirmed. "Everyone deserves a second chance, even if it took them a while to ask for it." Rosie smiled. "That's very generous of you," she said. "It's not generosity," Aunt Gertrude said. "It's wisdom. I learned a long time ago that resentment doesn't hurt the person who hurt you. It only hurts you, and I'm too old to carry that weight anymore." She got up from her chair with a small groan. Her bones still protested, but now she had better doctors, better medicine, better conditions. Money didn't buy happiness, but it did buy comfort. And at 68 years, older comfort was invaluable. "What's for dinner?" she asked. "Coconut cream pie," Rosie said. "Your recipe, the one you taught me." Aunt Gertrude smiled. The coconut cream pie, her grandmother's recipe, the same dessert they had wanted to throw away in Richard's house. Now she ate it every week, in her own apartment, with a friend who valued her. It was curious how life worked. "Let's go inside," Aunt Gertrude said, "before it gets cold." They walked together toward the interior of the apartment. 2 women who had been invisible their whole lives. 2 women whom the world had ignored, belittled, forgotten, but who now had each other, and that was all they needed. This story shouldn't exist. Stories like this shouldn't be necessary. Older people shouldn't be abandoned by their families. Black women shouldn't be treated as if they are worthless. People with larger bodies shouldn't be invisible. But the world is imperfect. And that's precisely why stories like Aunt Gertrude's matter. 1 year later, the Auntie Titi Foundation now had 8 homes in 3 countries: Brazil, the United States, and Portugal. More than 400 seniors lived in those homes, seniors who had been abandoned, seniors who had no one, seniors who, like Aunt Gertrude, had been treated as invisible. Aunt Gertrude visited each home personally. She sat with the residents, listened to their stories, reminded them that they were not alone. because she knew what it was like to be alone, and she didn't want anyone else to feel that. Patricia had come to Miami. They had talked for hours. They had cried. They had yelled. And in the end, they had begun to rebuild. Something that resembled a relationship. It wasn't perfect. It never would be. The damage was done, but it was a beginning. Richard had lost his company. Bad investments. Partners who betrayed him. Karma. Aunt Gertrude thought, although she never said it out loud, Marcella was still a lawyer, still cold, still didn't call. And Fernanda. Fernanda had divorced Richard when he lost his money. It turned out her love had a price. And when the price disappeared, so did the love. Aunt Gertrude didn't feel joy at their misfortunes, just a kind of melancholy sadness. They had had so many opportunities to be better people, and they had wasted them all. But that was their story, not hers. Aunt Gertrude's story was different. It was the story of a woman who spent 68 years being invisible, who was humiliated, ignored, forgotten, who had to wait until the end of her life to be seen, but who was finally seen. Not for the money. The money was just a means, a tool. She was seen by the people she helped, by the seniors in her homes, by Rosie, by Patricia, by all those who finally looked at her and saw a human being worthy of respect. That was what really mattered. On the last day of that story, Aunt Gertrude was sitting in the garden of Otavio House in Sao Paulo. It was a small but pretty garden, with flowers she had chosen herself, with benches where the residents could sit and soak up the sun. Next to her was a 93-year-old woman. Her name was Dona Aparecida. She had been abandoned by her children in a public hospital. They had found her alone, confused, with no one to claim her. Now she lived in Otavio House. She had her own room, 3 meals a day, companions who listened to her, caregivers who treated her with dignity. Dona Gertrudes. Dona Aparecida said, her voice weak but clear. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course," Aunt Gertrude said. "Why do you do this? Why do you spend your money on us? You could be in a mansion, traveling the world, but you're here, with old people like me." Aunt Gertrude smiled. She took Dona Aparecida's wrinkled hand. "Because I know what it's like to be invisible," she said. "I know what it's like to have no one look at you. I know what it's like to feel worthless. And if I can make just one person feel seen, then it's all worth it." Aunt Aparecida looked at her with watery eyes. "You're an angel," she said. "I'm no angel," Aunt Gertrude replied. "I'm just an old woman who got lucky and decided to use that luck for something good." They sat in silence for a moment, gazing at the garden, listening to the birds, feeling the sun on their faces. And Aunt Gertrude thought about her brother, Otto, the letters she never sent, the love she could never express in person, but now, through her, it was reaching hundreds of people. "I promise you, Otto," Aunt Gertrude whispered, so softly only she could hear it. "I'm going to take care of everyone I can, just like you took care of me." And she kept her promise. Aunt Gertrude Oliveira de Souza lived to be 84 years old. She passed away peacefully in her Miami condo with Rosie by her side. The foundation she created continues to operate to this day. It has 25 homes in 7 countries. Over 2,000 seniors live there, and in every home there's a picture of a black woman, elderly, large, smiling at the camera. Below the photo, there's a plaque that reads, "Aunt Gertrude Oliveira de Souza, founder 1956-2040. She saw the invisible." Because that's what Aunt Gertrude did. She saw the people that no one else saw, and she reminded them that they mattered You have two choices now. You can close this video and go on with your day. Forget what you heard. Go back to your routine, or you can do something different. You can look around you. See the people you normally ignore. The elderly man who sells newspapers on the corner. The woman who cleans your office. The neighbor who lives alone and never gets visitors. You can see them, really see them. You don't need millions of dollars to make a difference. Sometimes, all it takes is a smile, a kind word, a moment of attention. Aunt Gertrude spent 68 years being invisible. But when she finally had the power to do something, she used it to see others. You can do the same, right now, without waiting to inherit anything. The question is, will you? In the comments, tell me, do you know someone like Aunt Gertrude, someone who gives everything without receiving anything in return, someone who deserves to be seen, but the world ignores? Tell me their story, because every story matters. And if this story made you feel something, share it, not for the video, for the message, for the truth that we all deserve to be seen, for the hope that karma exists, even if it sometimes takes a while to arrive. My name doesn't matter. The story matters, and this one started with a family who kicked out their aunt at Christmas and ended with that same aunt, changing the lives of thousands of people, because sometimes those who have the least give the most, and sometimes the invisible are the ones who see the most. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and a happy life to all those who choose to see. Until the next story.